Welcome to the Unstarving Musician podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. If you're here for the first time, well, let me tell you what I do here. I talk about things related to marketing, business, and the creative aspects of music, sometimes with other independent musicians and occasionally with music industry professionals. It's all about my hope of making your music journey a little easier and more profitable. This episode is actually an interview episode. It's the first since, for a while, since before I took about a month break. And I'll get to that in a second, but first, how are you? Where are you? How's your weather? And yes, what are you wearing? Do you ever wonder what I'm wearing since I'm always asking that? I'll tell you. Not much. Enough though. Don't freak out. It's, I got some khaki shorts on, some really old ones that I just can't seem to let go of, and a long sleeve tee. That's it, man. Well, my underpants, but you don't care about that. It's a beautiful day here in Querétaro. I set up a small version of my drum set to practice for a sort of last minute just added gig I have this weekend. Every time I do that in the recording studio, I think everything's going to sound echoey if I don't cover it up, and I didn't really cover it up, so hopefully things sound normal. They probably do. It's just me. It sounds a little echoey in here because the drums reverberate. Is that the word? They reverberate? Well, anyway, yes, I hope you're doing okay. Not watching too much news. But, occasionally letting go of those things you believe in case, you might need to change your mind, right? All right, so yes, this is an interview episode, first in a while. It's with Tara Brueske. She's been playing and composing since she was a wee little girl. She's pursued a wide range of musical styles, including everything I've ever thought of pursuing, I'm pretty sure, and then some. Then quite a bit more. She's performed, recorded, published music, published a book, and taught music. Teaches. She's actually an active educator of voice, piano, performance, and how to get gigs. Probably some other things I didn't even talk to her about. But we kind of connected because she's written a new book, 20 must-have booking tips every musician needs. I wrote down every musician needs, singular, but I'm sure that's needs, which you can find. You can find her book at tarabrueske.com or onto Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes. And lest I forget, she is also on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find that at tarabrueske.com too. So I'm just going to leave it at that, but you should check her out on Instagram and tarabrueske.com. Okay, did I say that enough? So Tara and I connected via Instagram. She popped into my DM, my direct messages one day, and we started chatting, and here she is in an episode of The Unstarving Musician, the first in a while, like I said earlier. We talk about her podcast. She has one of those too, one of these. Her new book, of course, Making Connections Via Social Media, how she does that so well, I think. Getting gigs. We talk about getting gigs. And I ask her about developing educational products and considerations for musicians who want to develop their own educational content. I asked her where she finds her audience for educational content that she creates. We talk about segmenting and serving her supporters and customers, which is a great sort of reminder for all of us, something we should do. We discuss email list engagement, paid social media ads, collaborative partnerships with content creators. That's a good one. That was a great reminder. I got it from elsewhere this week too. And reaching out gradually, the concept of reaching out gradually. And then my selfish question about hitting that first note of a song on vocals. If you'd like to know about things like hitting the first note and other things I talk about on the podcast and things I think about for you guys, you should check out Liner Notes. It is an email newsletter from yours truly, in which I share some of the best things I've either garnered from conversations here on the Unstarving Musician or that I've researched, surveyed you about. And I dig into things for you like marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, hitting the first note, and much more. You can sign up for liner notes at unstarvingmusician.com. There will be a link in the show notes. Oh, and by the way, when you sign up, you'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and liner notes exclusives. It's free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. All right, so Tara Brueske, super nice lady. She seems like she's really got it going on. She's done a lot of stuff musically and in the content creation world. So let's get into it, shall we? Here's me talking with Tara Brueske.
Okay, I see more light. Well,
man, Zoom sure has made a lot of changes. I don't like it.
I know. Okay, I think it's got the microphone now that I'm supposed to be on.
Nice top you got there.
Oh, thank you.
Looking snazzy.
Trying to.
We're not going to keep video, just FYI.
Okay, I didn't know for sure, so I thought just in case.
In fact, we'll kill video in a minute.
Oh, okay. It's not a problem. It's not like
nice?
I really went to extra.
I should have mentioned it, but yeah, well.
That's fine. You know, I listen to podcasts as listening. So to me, the whole video thing is like, I kind of don't care.
Yeah, I don't think I've watched a whole one on video. There might have been a rare occasion where they were doing something on the video that I knew they were doing that I needed or really wanted to see. So,
right.
Where do you live?
Right. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh yeah, I read something about gigs or something in Minnesota.
Yes, in the middle of the country. I am from Minnesota. I didn't grow up in Minneapolis. I grew up in some small towns, but I've been in Minneapolis for, quite a few years since college. I did have a short stint in LA. I've lived other places in my childhood, but mostly Minnesota. So
okay,
I call myself more of a Minnesota girl.
Yeah. So I don't even remember, and we won't get political on the podcast, but
It's okay.
I didn't even remember. Is Minnesota like a swing state or a red state or what is it?
It always goes blue.
Does it? Okay, gosh, you'd think I would know that.
No, I don't always love that, I'll be honest, but it's what it is. I love my family. I love living here. I have a lot of good friends and I've had a lot of opportunities. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. Well, I was born in Texas, and then my wife and I met in Texas, but we lived in California for many years. So we've been to all the extremes.
Okay. I bet you're right. Well, I do hear a little bit of Texas accent, actually.
Okay. Well,
which is, it's nice. Our Minnesota accents are so here it is what it is, but it's short vowels and
it's almost Canadian at times.
It is. And the farther north you get in Minnesota, it's even more. So
yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't even notice my accent, and I think Sammy gets busted for it, my wife, more than I do on mine, which irritates her.
Oh. Well, I just always, because I'm a voice teacher too, and so I think I'm always listening to voices, and just how people talk too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that makes sense.
You have a lot of warmth in your speaking voice. I noticed that listening to your podcast, which is a blessing.
When I used to, or in the early episodes, I used compression and things very regularly, and now I don't. I'm sure my microphone makes a difference, but I also do my best to sort of treat the room. That was like the first thing I learned, I think. But I guess I learned that I have kind of a chill voice, and I know that's kind of my demeanor. I don't get too excited most of the time.
Sure. That can be, it's nice though when it's audio because it comes across. You think about radio voices. There's reasons people have, that hire people for radio the way they do. So,
right, it's true.
Good thing.
What's the status of your podcast?
The engaging voice it's all about the voice. And I have done it for 5 years, but I'm taking a break from it well, it's been for almost a year just because I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue it or start a new one or what. And I don't know yet.
Was it all
So
about
the singing
singing?
voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Being a voice teacher, I was trying to bring a lot of the technical aspects to that
Mm-hmm.
of just helping people with their singing voice and to figure out like some of the science behind it. So I had different guests on too, which was great. Like I had a otolaryngologist on. um I had a lot of different people just through different things because it was things I was interested in too. And so yeah, because I love that topic, but I also, after 5 years, felt like I just needed just a re, figuring out like, do I want to keep going into this topic or do I want something new? Or so
Sure.
that's the verdict on it.
Yeah. Well, I don't recall if we talked about it. I think you did bring it up, but I uh, took a break and then I thought, well, I won't do interviews or I won't do many of them. I probably will do interviews, but I won't do many of them.
Yeah.
I wasn't even sure I was going to continue podcasting, although I thought there was a good chance I would, but I probably took
Yeah.
about a month break, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I get it. That's because it is a lot. It's a lot to prepare too and get
Hmm.
out there. I don't, if like, if people have never done it, obviously they don't know that. So
It's a lot, and it adds when you're trying to do a good job. When you're really, really
yes.
trying, like trying to emulate the best of, you
Yeah.
know.
And getting good guests or getting just, the topics that you want to talk about. Yeah, it is a lot of it's work, like anything else. So,
Are you thinking of a different type of podcast possibly in the future?
yeah, because I do like podcasting and I grew up listening to my dad and his best friend like making kind of crazy like tapes, in the cassette tapes and reel to reel days.
Hmm.
And I think that little bug in me, I always I have liked and I enjoyed the podcast. I'm just not sure, I think, if it's going to be something again in the music business or something maybe faith-based. I really don't know. It's I'm allowing myself time to think through it.
So many things.
I know.
Did you get some of your clients through the podcast?
I have actually some of the singing, yeah. And I'm trying to think. Well, and I've had collaborations with people that I know, like even our mutual friend that we know, Lynz Crichton. I
Hmm.
had her on the podcast one time actually, and um, I've had people, yeah, through I don't know, through even other podcasts I've been on, or sometimes people have just written me. But yeah, I have actually gotten some students from it as well. So it just was an all around great thing. And yeah, glad I did it, and it's still out there, as you know. And podcasts, even when you aren't recording every week, they're there.
Hmm.
So pointing people to episodes, which I still do. I do it to some of my voice students and people that follow me kind of through my vocal things. Um,
That's great.
that are yeah. So that's where it is.
That's really great. All right, so you just wrote a book, 20 must-have booking tips every musician needs. What compelled you to write this book?
Well, a couple things. When in 2000, I think it was 17, yeah, 2017, I was looking at putting out a course that summer and ended up. Do you know Bree Noble at all?
I do. Yeah, I was going to say we have another mutual friend, Bree Noble. I
Yeah.
haven't talked to her
So
in a really long time, but yes,
okay,
I'm
so
familiar.
Bree and she had me on her podcast like 2 years before then, and we were in some kind of challenge, like a group challenge together on Facebook, and it was about developing courses. And so she encouraged me to do. We were talking more, and she encouraged me to do a course on booking gigs, and which I did. That was called "Getting the Gig: 4 Weeks to Book Like a Boss," and So as I've always had the course now through the years, I kind of upgraded it and added things to it over the years. But I also felt like I knew there were going to be people that weren't going to be able to either afford the course or just the time of it. And I still wanted to get something that could be available really for any musician. And so that's really what made me decide about this book. And I thought about this actually it was probably almost 2 years ago where I was thinking about writing a book, and I took one of those free challenges of how to write a book and which only gives you so much, but it was kind of the right time because it put the idea in my head, and I realized that it would be doable. And I think I was always scared to tackle a book because I thought, oh my goodness, I can't do that. But as I took that course and realized, no, this is actually possible, then it was just kind of setting deadlines and then figuring out what do I actually want to include in this book. And some of the things that I've included are drawn from my booking course because that was already material that I had developed. But I really tried to do it with a person in mind that would be, either having done a little bit of booking or maybe no booking at all. And like, what would be the most helpful steps? Like, could I give them something that would just be like, here's step one, here's step two, and that it wouldn't make it difficult, that could encourage somebody to easily get into the process and then actually be booking gigs. So that's kind of how it came about and why I decided to write the book. Because I think in part too, I have noticed with so many musicians that they want to perform, but they don't know where or how, or as far as like the actual places where they can. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned so much through the years of booking myself, um, and booking for a band and booking for a duo, is that there are a lot of even kind of hidden gems that people are unaware of that could be places that they can play. And they don't have to always be touring or playing just kind of the traditional clubs, which is what I think a lot of people usually start with or
Mm-hmm.
think about starting with.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I saw a list of your suggestions, and actually, I loved that you had that in there. I think through the course of the Unstarving Musician podcast, I sort of turned on to the idea of creating your own gigs, I guess is a good way to put it. And also, just as you put in your book, thinking outside the box of the traditional type of venues. So yeah, that's really cool. In the book, by the way, thank you for sending me the ebook version of it.
Sure.
It's a real, for anyone listening, it's a quick read. It's got some great stuff in it. I kind of laugh because and I think you noted this as well when we first started chatting on Instagram, we have definitely sort of walked on similar paths. Although I would say
Yes.
our music, the type of music, I mean, just to be very specific, the types of music
Sure.
that we played throughout all of our time as music is pretty different, but not entirely, because I see that you've touched on so many genres. But also you're clearly a trained musician. Correct
Right.
me if I'm wrong on that. And
No, I
I'm
am.
like 90% self-taught, and then like
Sure.
later in life a little education, or midway through, and then later again. But so there are those differences. But it was kind of funny now. Yeah, when I put out my book on a similar type theme, it reads a little. Well, I was going through yours, and it was very to the point, great. Mine sort of reads like a a bit of a caption of a part of my life story.
But that's great because story, that's what always connects too when we hear other people's stories.
Yeah, hopefully. It's a little mine, not yours. Mine,
Yeah.
in retrospect, feels a little convoluted. In fact, I've been for so many months saying to myself, I need to make a second edition, to just sort of update it with all these new things I've learned through
Sure.
talking to other people, and then just to like make it to improve it for readability, I think. And I always considered myself a decent writer, but when I look back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is crap. But
I think we all think that when we write. I
probably
do.
so. Probably
I
so.
do.
Probably so. But anyway, it looks great. It's got a lot of great topics in there. I think one of the first sections I looked at was your, thinking outside the box. Oh, you know what, the other one that really caught my attention, you have
Mm-hmm.
a bit in there about following up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people like you and I take all this stuff for granted, and it's so nice that you did not take it so much for granted that you wouldn't write things that seem very basic, but yeah, we do take it for granted. I'm actually in Lynz Crichton's music
Mm-hmm.
marketing method group, and when I
Yeah.
heard some of the folks in there talking about looking for gigs, I was like, yeah, it's exactly what people told me. Like you can't take for granted that people know what you know.
Yes, it's true.
But in speaking of follow up, I think you mentioned something along these lines, and I wanted to bring up that how we
Mm-hmm.
got connected. You were trolling me on Instagram clearly, and but you DM'd me, and we started
True.
chatting, and I wasn't even thinking about doing, well, no, actually I was thinking about doing interviews, but I had no idea who that next one would be with. But
Right.
we just had really pleasant conversation, and you were um, very nice, very kind, very warm. And your picture makes you look very happy too, so that was a good thing. And I saw our commonalities, but do you do
Yeah.
that? Do you do that type of thing a lot? I know Lynz talks a lot about it. Drop into people's DMs, get to know them. Is that kind of a regular thing for you?
It is and it isn't. It's kind of funny. There are some people that I'm more prone to dropping into their DMs if I see something that catches my eye.
Mm.
And some days I scroll way too much on Instagram, and that's just too much of scrolling and not enough of really like, oh, what should I be doing? But I think for me, as far as even um really getting connected with people, as far as like with gigs and booking, a lot of times I've drawn from kind of that, if you want to call it like a cold call or a cold connection where I don't know someone at all and I'm just um introducing myself to a place. My thought is always, and I know you're the same way, is just to really find some commonality with somebody when you
Mm.
do that, so that because I think about it this way. In fact, I heard this from, I cannot remember if the guy's name was Tom Jackson. I think it was from, he's a guy that does stuff in Nashville that kind of teaches people all about the music biz. Anyway, I had heard him talk about it this way. Like he said, treat when you're getting gigs actually like a date. And I would like to say it even more like, well, maybe that sounds weird to people, but even just like a friendship. When you start off a friendship with somebody, how do you start off? Like, why do you connect with some people? Usually it's because there's something in common. And trying to find those things, or just kind of paying attention to, do I have some commonality with this person that I'm connecting with? Now, sometimes you don't know it. Like if you're making a cold call on the phone, even if you've looked at a website, you don't necessarily know what things you might have in common. But, even like if I'm connecting with let's just say like a winery, and I've looked at their website and noticed that like the pictures are just so beautiful. Like I see either the place itself, like they've got a lot of land space, or maybe the decorations, or maybe it looks like a garden, or whatever it might be. If I find those things really like that, I love them, I'm going to tell people right away, because I want to connect with that way too, because it's something I value. Like I value beauty. I don't know. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is, and then some sort of getting deep into what goes on in your head when you're
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're out there making friends and
Mm-hmm.
trying to meet new venue people and things. I would imagine. I was thinking going into our conversation today that there are a number of musicians. You and I are great case studies. I guess people, musicians who want to create educational content or are creating educational content. And so for that reason, I wanted to ask you both for other musicians that are doing it and from a self-serving perspective too. But can you walk us through the process of maybe a little bit about the development of your course? It can be the getting the gigs for 4 weeks to book like a boss, or maybe some other one that is fresher on your mind, if there is one that's fresher. But through the process of developing it, and especially the process of launching it.
So here's something I'll say that I did not have 7 years ago when I started, and that is AI. And of course, we now have access to that all the time. So, but the thought process that I had, even that, and even with my books, and I did use AI on some things for my book, as far as just kind of sometimes gathering my own ideas, is getting an outline. Like, what am I, with a course, a lot of times, or a book, it's like, what's the purpose? You want to think about, what is the purpose for doing what you're doing, and what is the point or points that you are trying to get across to people. And so creating that, like, it might be a really broad outline, but I know, like, with booking, when I did my course and even with the book, I started thinking about just some of the basic, what I call kind of tacits of booking, which were contacting, or first of all, just finding places, you know, contacting them, actually doing follow-ups, booking the gig, and then anything of details after that. So, even there, that's like 5 different things. And then from there, breaking it down and saying, how did I do this? Or what did I find that were ways that worked for each one of these things? For instance, like in the trying to find gigs, it was how I did maybe Google searches or talking to other musicians, or once like, what word choices did I use for finding those places? Like, what search words did I use? Just things like that that people don't always think of. I mean, I I tend to when I do something, I will tend to research things in general. It's kind of just a little bit of who I am. I don't know if it's being a reader or an introvert. I don't know, but I tend to do that. And so anyway, that's kind of where I start, is with this broader outline, because I think it's trying to think of, again, things that are going to be helpful. And I always think of the practical things, like, what are the practical things that people need? I've kind of learned, I'll just say this, because whatever kind of thing you're creating too, you have to know yourself enough. And I don't think I realize this about myself, but I'm not as much of a mindset coach. And I know some people are really good that way, where they can create something that's more of helping people with their mindsets. For me, I'm more of the practical, like, I'm going to get you from A to B in these steps. And it's kind of that teacher factor in me of that's how I create. But I think kind of understanding yourself as a person, if you're going to create educational things, it's just kind of also recognizing, what are my strengths too, of how I do that. Because I think people have very different strengths in all those kinds of ways of getting information to people, or teaching, or helping them. And people respond differently.
Sure. What were some of the challenges you faced when you were from the development phase to launching it?
Time.
Yeah.
I set a deadline for myself, and in part I set a deadline because when I was actually talking to Bree Noble about this, she kind of helped me partner in. She had a big audience, and she wanted to get it out to her audience. She thought it would be helpful for her audience, and so we set a date together. And so the time frame of thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get all the stuff written? Where am I going to upload it to? Because I had to do a lot of research of even finding, like, places that host a course online, places that host the video for it. Some things do all of that together, but sometimes you have to get one thing to where you're hosting the course, and another thing of where you're hosting the video part of the course. I had to record the video. There were so many little challenges that way that all took a lot of time. And I was doing this all the while I was still booking and gigging myself, which was full time, and teaching. And so I think that challenge of trying to get everything done is difficult. And then also, once I even got the word out, and Bree did too, wondering, I had to create a free challenge for people so that I could walk them through just little pieces of it, and then see if they were actually going to buy it. And I think that part was scary for me, because it was the first time I had ever done something like this, and thinking, is anybody going to, is it going to connect with anybody? And so I think I was even shocked when it did. So
that's great. I hadn't thought, I'm sure if I read a little bit more about how to do these launches, I would have thought about doing like a challenges or a free challenge to attract some interest in some things. So, how many courses do you have now?
I have just 3, I think, because I've got the booking course, I've got a virtual, uh, what would I virtual blueprint that's kind of for doing gigs online, which that I created during 2020 when everybody was having to stream online if you were going to get gigs. And then I also that same year in 2020 created a vocal course called Uncover Your Best Voice. And then I've got a couple of other small offering type things, but those kind of were the main ones. And like I say, I think just wanting to get a course out to people with booking to really give people a structure, because the thing that I learned through the years, and I wasn't necessarily taught this, I kind of gleaned it from a lot of things I had learned, but I still have seen that a lot of, I mean, it's not just musicians, sometimes it's anybody starting even a small business, but when you don't have a structure in place, sometimes it's hard to keep up with everything.
How do you mean,
And
like a structure of everything or a structure
uh
for like a course itself?
like a course itself, and then also like if you are going to be just booking, like let's say you're a musician and you want to book gigs but you don't have anywhere way of organizing or knowing what are your next steps or what you need, if you don't have kind of a basic structure in place for that, it's going to be a lot more complicated and a lot harder to keep track of. And this way, like the structure I've created specifically for booking, which I'm sure other people have too, but I just know that I've got, in place. So now, like when I book gigs, it actually doesn't take me a ton of time. It's a shorter amount because I have things in place like, well, I know that I'm supposed to do this next, or it's a follow up, and then I keep track of how I do those, or, um, if I need to send invoices out or contracts, it's just there's a set, everything's kind of organized in the way that I do it. So it makes it simpler, the task.
Sure. So just being super organized has been a big help.
Well, I found it. I mean, I some of that is also I think within my giftings is I like organization and kind of helping
Sure.
people do that. But yeah, but I have seen it. I have seen it help even students that I've had that have taken the course. In fact, one of the ladies that took the course and then she also bought my book, she was telling me recently, even after reading my book, because she hadn't done the course and she was there the first year of it, so that's 7 years ago, and she hadn't really re-looked at it. She said when she read my book, there was like 2 chapters she kept going back to, and it was just helpful for her right now, kind of for those little like, wait a minute, I need to check this point, or what am I supposed to do again? So again, that's why I think I've tried to make things in this way that it's like what am I trying to say? Different touch points of like different tacits, different, um, just trying to find, like, is this about a follow up, or is this about when you actually call a place or contact, or when do you send a thank you to people? you know?
Right. Yeah, that's great
So.
reader feedback too. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, or if you were just listening in at the beginning of this conversation, you can probably sense that I'm pretty into the whole craft of podcasting. A lot of podcasts don't even make it past their first episodes, though, their first few episodes, because sustaining a podcast isn't all that easy. Lack of planning and misaligned expectations are a recipe for fast burnout. If you want to start a podcast, if you've been thinking about starting a podcast and would like to start it the right way, I would like to invite you to check out Podcast Startup, created by yours truly. With new podcasters in mind, I want to help you just bypass all the mistakes and things that I didn't know about when I started. So to learn more, just go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup. You can sign up to receive a free podcast startup tip sheet and learn more about the course. Maybe it's for you. What advice do you have for musicians that are thinking about creating their own content or courses, educational content or courses or books or whatever? What are some key things that they should consider?
Couple things. One is, sounds crazy, but just simply to set a deadline. And that deadline can be changed, but there is nothing like having something in front of you to give you that sense of like, this is what I'm working towards. And for some people, honestly, the deadline, they will work more as they get really close to it. Like it'll push them there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm not that way. I'm like, I want to, I'm very much, I like to prepare and I like to plan. So if I have a deadline, I put it way out there. And so I can know I can kind of just space myself, uh, take it, one day at a time. But it doesn't matter. Both ways work because everybody's different again in how they meet those deadlines. But I think that's a really key thing. I think the second thing is just to know that whatever you're going to be talking about is something, or, preparing or putting together is something that you feel like you actually know fairly well. And not because you can't, learn new things. I'm still always learning things. And even in booking, I'm still learning things. But I think that's important to remember so that whatever you're putting out, the content is really helpful to people. And then thinking about what is it that your audience might need? Like, do you know what your audience might need? Is it some help on, for instance, let's say like you're a songwriter and you feel like you're really good at writing lyrics and people struggle with that. So is that something that would be helpful to another musician? Or even if you're a teacher, maybe you're just helping somebody with music theory. I mean, whatever it is, think about like the things that maybe you've heard, or poll your audience. I mean, you can always do that on social media of just, asking questions. Is this something that would be helpful? Um, I've done that a few times. Or if you have a mailing list, that can be really key, actually, the mailing lists of your subscribers. And that's assuming you have subscribers. But if you do, that can be a wonderful thing to do. But I think I think those are key things. And then also to realize that the first thing you put out for people, it doesn't have to be perfect. Because that's, I think, another thing that people get caught up in, like, well, what if it isn't like the most perfect video or the, whatever. Um, Give yourself the grace. You can teach or you can put out what you know and people will still consume it if they're connecting with you. Because I really think, the why, like for instance, why I did a free 3-day, 4-day thing before I actually sold my courses, I wanted people to actually get to know me and my style and what I was doing and to even see if they connected with me. Because I recognize there will be people who will connect with me immediately, some that might be kind of connected, and then some that it just for whatever reason, maybe I rubbed them the wrong way or they're just not digging it, and that's okay. But I think just to realize that it's going to be the people that you connect with, that they are connecting with you as a person, that will make them want to learn from you or want to take in your stuff, even your music. Like if you're an artist and you're putting out just even music, a lot of times people will buy your music not even always because they love it. I mean, sometimes that is why, but sometimes it's because they really like you or what they heard in concert and you sharing the music, like the way you did it. How did it make them feel? And I think that's the big thing of probably than anything, is that if you make people feel a certain way, then they're going to connect with your stuff.
Right. I'm curious to know where the bulk of your audience for the education part of what you're doing, where did that come from? Was it an email list? Was it socials? Was it a combination of things?
It was a combination. I would say the original, though, was definitely from honestly partnering up with Bree Noble and then kind of being exposed to her email list. But then I started my own. And as I was putting out the course, and I mean, I remember doing some ads on Facebook for it and Instagram. I was even on TikTok for a while. But I think just that growing the email list, I've heard this so many times, but those are the people that as long as you're serving them on the email list, they're going to stick with you. And they kind of have to do something with that email. Like they can ignore it when it comes to their inbox, but it's not like they can just scroll past it.
Right.
If they open it, they've already made one step into that of connecting with you, or at least maybe reading the first couple sentences. And I'm one thing that I do try to do, and I've some people do it every single week. Some people do it once a month. I've been doing it about twice a month now, but I kind of have three groups of people that I serve. I have my fans who actually like love my music that I perform. I have those that have either taken a free course with me of something related to booking. Um, and then I also have those that has to do with singing through my podcasts or through some voice teaching. Anyway, just to say that all of those groups, I try to twice a month get an email out to them, even if it's a short one, and hopefully to provide something that'll be helpful. Sometimes it's one like small little tip. If it's my fans, it might just be one concert where I'm playing soon. But I think it's just important to keep in touch with people and not make emails super long either, because people don't have time, but just a small touch point to let them know that you actually care about them.
I think that's great, and it's something I'm personally challenged with, like as a musician versus a podcast host versus someone who's marketing a course for new podcasters.
Sure.
Some of them suffer because I probably always think I have to do something, give them something amazing every time I every time I exercise one of the touch points. Yeah, I think that what you were saying about remembering to serve the groups of your audiences, because I definitely have them,
Mm-hmm.
and I serve two really well. And I do something that you caution people about doing, which is with my liner notes newsletter. The emails are a little long. Now I'm talking 2 to 3 minute read, but that's kind
Oh,
of long these days for an email. Um, it's not a quick glance and out. I mean, it can be, but
yeah.
so I'll go into some technical things on publishing or YouTube royalties or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, actually high level, so not terribly technical, but takes
Yeah.
a little bit of time to educate people on. But anyway, engagement seems to be good on those, and but they take me some time.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think somehow I feel that I need to say something amazing when I talk to people who care about what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing just as a musician. But
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it can be amazing, but it doesn't have to be so grand.
Well, and I think, it sounds to me like too, if you also are putting in stories or whatever, because I know even sometimes when I do share a story in an email, it is longer because I'm trying to share the whole thing via words. So, uh, and the other thing is just obviously like you know your audience, you know your engagement. That's the important thing is who your audience is and what they're connecting with.
Hmm.
So, and I've kind of found too from people that sometimes write back kind of what has been appealing to them like about the email or not. And of course sometimes, no one writes back, but I have had times where people have. I know. But I look at open rates too, and that's one thing I've been so grateful for. Um because I hear that anything more than like 20% or above open rates is really amazing, and I'm just so grateful for what I'm getting in open rates from people and hearing people here and there respond too.
Yeah.
So in fact, I just had somebody just last week that I wrote an email, and she wrote back and she just said she really connected with whatever I wrote. And now, honestly, I can't even remember what I wrote. but I think it was something where I had shared a story about booking something recently, and so it was nice to hear that she had connected back. And that's the thing too. I mean, I think for a lot of people, they think too, well, if they don't get responses, that means people aren't reading them, but we don't know that. And, a lot of times people just don't take the time to respond. They might read it and it goes, it's something that is really helpful. And it's good to remember that. I'll just say this kind of in general, whether it's emails, whether it's, um, trying to book a gig, there's so often where we don't hear back from people and we make this assumption that they don't like us, they don't want us, they don't want us in their inbox, they don't want us calling them or emailing, and that's not necessarily the case. And I think we have to stop making those assumptions because like one of my sayings in booking is you keep contacting until you hear a firm yes or a firm no. Cuz
100%. Yeah.
you know, and I've learned that. Although I still struggle with it at times myself too, where I don't hear back from some place and then I think, well, okay, it's been a while. Even after I've contacted again, I think, are they going to ever book me again? Um, but it's funny how it's just, I think in general, unfortunately kind of the world we live in, it's so, people are inundated with stuff, with data, and with emails and social media. And so it's a lot that's going in our brains daily. And I think that's why sometimes people just don't respond. Even phone calls, even if they get a voice message or something, they may not.
Right, and these darn devices we all carry around are mind numbing.
I know. It's
I
true.
feel I call people zombies when they walk and look at their phone at the same time,
Yeah.
because I've seen some memes that were like they do kind of look alike. They have the same slouch.
It's
Um,
true.
you mentioned that you ran some ads as well. I think we were still talking about your course, but how did the
Yeah.
ads work for you?
It depended, because so I've had the course for 7 years, and I've launched it probably about um 10 times maybe. I think at first I was doing it like 2 launches in a year. So then I would be doing ads. And depending on, like, earlier, I would say in the 7 years ago, the ads were probably just cheaper in general. And so what I was getting for my money and how it would be shown to people was actually decent. I did find out, which is interesting because now we are here in America in the political year. And I remember being told this 4 years ago too, that they said ads will, like, especially on Facebook or Instagram, um, they will go, the closer we get to an election, the price of them will go up.
Mm,
And so it's like you have to be kind of mindful of when, I mean, you don't always know this, but just like when you're launching something or when you're paying for ads, and then really targeting who you think your people might be. Um, that's one thing I learned from even taking. I took one of the freebie ad challenges from a lady, Adrienne Richardson, I think was her name, and she talked about that of being really specific with kind of, again, knowing who your the person is, who the audience that you're serving,
right.
and whether what if
Targeting.
it's exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it like I say, I have had mixed reviews because sometimes I did really well, and other times, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago that I launched, I can't remember actually if it was my vocal course or the booking course, but point being that whatever I did, I remember everything was really costly, like per link click, if you want, or click,
Hmm. Hmm.
click link, link
Yeah.
click.
Click through, whatever,
Anyway,
CPM. Yeah.
right. So it just, yeah, it really varied. But I did some advertising this summer for actually a gig that my brother and I did. It was kind of a prestigious gig, and that did well. So it's it's really up and down with ads. Although I do think that I didn't have this thought process in mind probably 7 years ago, for sure. I didn't. And then even up to maybe 4 years ago, I didn't. I think, though, I think it can be wise to take time to actually do some paid advertising. You can always do organic reach too, but I just think it's going to be a little slower growth. So if you've got something that you really want to get out, whether it's an album or a concert or a course or music books or whatever it is, I think that it's worth it to invest in some paid advertising. Because if you think about over the years, in marketing, before all the internet came, people would do radio commercials, TV commercials, and there's a reason they do that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, when I read the bigger success stories,
Mm-hmm.
ads come into the picture at not always right at the beginning, but they come into the
Right.
picture, and sometimes it's just from reinvesting because of some serendipitous success.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, I'm also curious, and you cited one example of when you did this, but leveraging the email lists of others. And I know with Bree, she's such a generous and giving and
She
supportive
is.
of her community kind of person. She may have just, it sounds like she just offered it. But do you have thoughts, or have you done anything? Because I've actually had some good experience with it recently, totally serendipitous. But do you have thoughts? Because I've been thinking about it in my head a little bit, but about being more strategic in proposing partnerships, I guess, or collaborations with people who have a good
Mm-hmm.
email list. Maybe you do something on, like in my case, maybe I do something on my podcast for them,
Yes.
or share something on my list. But have you done any of that? Have you given much thought to it?
I have. I've well, I've been on other people's podcasts, and then, like I think I mentioned earlier, even on my vocal podcast, I had people, and so that was even kind of partnering with their people too. But even when you talked about Lynz Crichton, um, she and I did that before. I did it with Bree. I did it with a couple of other ladies as well, where it was not even necessarily podcast, but maybe we did a training, a mutual training together. Like they had, I remember one girl I knew, she did kind of to what was her specialty? I think it was just kind of an overall helping people to kind of just manage their own music biz. And so we were friends already, had talked, and I did have her on my podcast, but this was a specific training with her audience, like where we did a Zoom meeting. And then I think she did one for my audience when I used to have a membership group called the Booking Table, which was just literally people, a monthly membership, and we were just talking about booking. So in that course, I did have some people where I partnered with and had them come to my group, and then maybe I'd go to their group. And so I think that partnerships can be wonderful. And I think the best thing is just to know, again, kind of, this is where I do think social media helps is when you kind of get to troll somebody and and you start to see some of the things they post, and you can just kind of see, like, do I connect with that or not? And if you do, sometimes that is the way of just the start of
A
a
beautiful friendship.
yeah, I mean, really. I can think of a girl, it's interesting because I knew her parents here in Minnesota, um but she started into doing a lot with SEO and also creating websites for people. But I got to know her more actually through, not through her parents, but through her Instagram account. And as I kept seeing all the stuff about SEO and realized she was so savvy with it, she was one too. Like I reached out and um, had her come to my group, and then I did something for her group. So it's just, I really do think it can be great partnerships because, and if you find someone that's in your similar field, I think some of those are the best. And even if it's similar but not exactly, I mean, everybody's going to have a little bit take, like you and I, even, it's like your book probably reached out a little bit different way in booking than maybe mine would, but they're still both incredibly like valuable, and it's similar. So you know um I do think the older I'm getting too, I just think partnering up or doing things with other people can be so helpful, and you just get to know more people and have good conversations with them, and you don't feel as alone either.
Yes, I think for myself, I should devote more time to that particular angle, and hopefully others that listen to this, maybe who haven't thought of it much before, will put some more thought into it now or ask some questions about it.
Well, let me say this too. Okay, so I'm an introvert, so my go-to is not to reach out to people. Like just being introverted, because a lot of times I just like doing things alone, and I'm internally motivated, and but I'm recognizing, even as an introvert, and I'm saying this to those of you who are introverts that listen to this, that sometimes it is, though, so helpful to just reach out to even one or two people. Like, you don't have to, it's not like you have to reach out to 10 people to make that happen. It might be that you just really feel like you connect, or with what you're seeing, maybe somebody post, or you're on an email list even of, um, and let it just be small to start with. I don't think people have to feel like, we go crazy with it. Like, oh, I've got to contact 20 people now.
Well, we sort of get that, and that goal mentality, and
Right.
visualizing how we're going to make something happen. It's like, well, I got to contact 20 people this month. Man, I understand. It's a strategy. It can be effective. It can be.
Yeah.
It can also wear you down if you're not careful. But
Yeah.
okay, I have to ask a super self-serving question
Okay.
about singing.
Okay. Go for it.
One thing I've realized that vexes me as kind of as a relatively young singer, like I've been trying to sing most of my life, but I got
Yeah.
more serious about it in recent years, and I'm,
Yeah.
starting to feel confident and everything, or I feel confident. Still, still building that, but
Hmm.
the thing that vexes me, and I don't know if this is common, but is hitting the first note of a song, hitting it well. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm there, but I'm not really there. I don't know if you hear this from other singers, if it's common, and whether it
Hmm.
is or not. What's your advice?
It's very common. And I think it's because it's sort of like you can, let me describe it this way. You can hit a note with all gusto, or you can just kind of gradually hit the note. And what I mean by that is it's like a careful hitting, like someone's being careful, instead of like, duh, it's like, duh,
Mhm.
and and what I have thought about sometimes is that it's like if you're going to jump in a pool versus wade in, you can wade in, and I do that actually a lot myself, like in a real pool. But the confidence and the way kind of the muscular structure works around the voice, if we have any hesitation, that will turn into tension. And so sometimes then that first note that comes out is more of that, or it feels like it's not as strong, or maybe pitch wise it's off. But if we can just trust ourselves to know that, and it does start in the mind, literally, it's it's more thinking of, I know that I can hit this note, and I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to trust that it's going to be there. And if we do that, usually the note that comes out, everything works in this more relaxed way that it's supposed to happen. But it does honestly start with the mind. I literally had, I mean, this is so stupid because I'm thinking as a vocalist, I should know this, but I was singing at a concert recently, and there's one song that for me, it starts high. And honestly, it's not a note that's too high for me. Normally, I don't have any problem. But if I think in the moment, like, oh no, that high note's coming, my body starts this tense thing. And then it comes out, but it comes out not sounding pretty versus just, letting it out, like just allowing it to be what it is. And it is partly, when we sing anyway, I don't think we think about this, but like when you sing a pitch, like how are you getting that pitch to be what it is? It's because you're thinking it, and the brain is sending signals to your vocal folds that are telling the muscles around them to like stretch it this much, or um, sing on this part of it, because it happens to, that's how that pitch is created. But it is a thought. It's not like when I hit the note of a piano, I'm hitting something physically. Same thing with a guitar. If you hit a drum, it's it's whatever you hit is that instrument. But your voice, it has to be signals that are being sent from your brain that are causing it to do what it does. Like it's the first part of it.
Hmm. And I'm sure some instrument players would say, "Oh no, it's quite the same." But
It
um,
probably is.
I mean, there are some similarities. However, again, I've been playing drums way longer than I've been trying to sing seriously, but it does
Hmm.
seem that there's a bit more at work when you're singing, and it may be that there's just so much going on in your head,
Hmm.
positive or otherwise. And so for me, it's definitely a pitch thing. It's just not
Hmm.
quite there. But I can see that everything you just said could still very much apply. But I also assume that, well, that's just literally working on your ear. you know?
Well, it is, but it's also having the freedom of the breath support behind it too, and allowing that there's not going to be tension in certain ways, even in your mouth, because there's a lot of things that cause tension, and that's a whole nother thing I could get into talking about.
That's
But
probably the majority of what it is for me, what you just said right there. I think being a little letting myself be caught off guard, even though I know that moment's coming, but
right,
my subconscious is not saying, "Okay,
yeah,
take a breath here."
right. That too. And I think the only reason I say differently, I'm a pianist, and I've actually started playing piano before I started ever singing. So, again, I know your brain is connected to your instruments too. It's not like it's not. But it's just that when I do hit a piano, like if I hit a C, it's going to play a C. It's not going to play another note. But when you sing, whatever a C may be, I don't have perfect pitch, but if I sing that note, or whatever note that I'm singing in whatever key, it could be a little off, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and but it also, the reason that it can be, sometimes it can be an ear training thing, but a lot of times it's more related to tension and breath, and the breath support, and the way that those vocal folds are actually able to vibrate to make that pitch.
Yeah, I'm hopefully this is true. I'm probably way more aware of it than most, and my wife's pretty sensitive to bad notes and mediocre singing. And I've mentioned this to her, and she's like, I didn't even notice. But she'll say
Right.
that about when I'm drumming, like, oh, I really, did something lame here. And she goes, people don't even notice. The only reason they notice is because you start laughing while you're playing or something.
Well, and I think that is somewhat true, though. We're our worst critics, and we're probably going to be far more tough on the things. Like I say, when I did this thing last week at a gig and I felt like I didn't hit this note, well, it wasn't that I didn't hit it in pitch. It was in pitch. It just to me wasn't pretty to my ear, and it could have been. So, but it also goes by so fast when an audience is listening that they're not sitting and holding on to that particular note and going, "Oh, that was terrible."
Yeah, and it's not, especially with maybe some of your shows are not like this, but a lot of them, I'm sure, where you have this sort of mixed audience where they're not necessarily there just for the music, even though that
Right.
there are cases where that is the case,
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly what they're there for, and nothing else.
Right. Right.
So a lot of it's social things and whatnot. So at least you have that. They weren't
Right.
really paying attention.
Right.
The wrap-up question I wanted to ask you
Yes.
is, what is slowing you down or challenging you the most these days?
I think the challenge is sometimes of time, but everybody has that. Um, I think specifically for me, it's sometimes figuring out, well, let me step back for a minute. There's some of the things that I'm doing right now that I'm getting with doing kind of new steps of booking or a new audience is I'm getting to something called keynote concerts. And it's in the corporate world or educational world or seminar world. But what I'm finding is that to sometimes get everything prepared just to be able to contact people is that there's got to be so many things in place, like a show reel and a website specifically for that. Just a lot of things I'm learning. And so I think trying to manage the time of, you know, what is it like, what's stopping me, or how much do I have to get done. But there's also one other thing besides that I was thinking about recently, and I'm sure that people feel this a lot of times, is just simply the fear of, what if it doesn't work, or what if I'm trying all this and it doesn't work out at all. And most of life I've realized that even if something doesn't work, then I can try something else. But I do think that I still at times struggle with that fear of that. And most of the time I don't feel like I have that, but it's funny how in this new venture, and the reason I say it is because literally just last week I was reaching out to some event planners that and actually the guy who I'm taking a course from for doing this is, it's so many similar things of what I already do, like what I've already known to do in other types of booking. And so I was kind of doing these same things and then not hearing back, and then right away thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is stupid. This isn't going to work out. What am I doing?" you know. And the funny thing is I coach people in this all the time of like, it takes time. It takes time to build those relationships. It takes time, a lot of follow-ups. Following up is one of the key things that I always talk to people about, like many, many times. And I forget that because there's been a lot of places in the past 15 years now that I have literally been playing for 10 to 15 years at specific places, like many venues. So I kind of forgot what it was like to be at the beginning. And So I think those are fears that are they kind of creep up, and I have to then go to my own book and take my own advice and say, so I do think I think it's always a struggle when you start something that's a little bit new. I mean, I feel ready for this course of things, but I think that fear is always a little part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a very common one, and I'm sure it's helpful for other people to hear that you, an educator, a seasoned one,
Yeah,
also
but still.
also go through the same things over some of the very things that you talk about. It still
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah,
So,
I think we forget. I was actually talking to a musician friend of mine just yesterday, and we were just saying how we both forget. He's a drummer actually, and we've played together at different gigs, and we said we forget sometimes that our music does actually touch people, and it actually provides something of joy or just being lifted up or somehow being encouraged. And we don't always know that because not every person's going to tell you that either. So I think it's just, you kind of just, when you get in the mode of doing gigs for so many years. I mean, I've literally been in this business since my family and I sang together, which is starting when I was 6.
wow.
So when you do so many concerts of your life, sometimes you do forget that. I mean, the reasons you're doing them, but you forget that it actually can affect people in a really beautiful way. And that's why it's worth it. So even for me pursuing something in the future that's a little different or with the corporate world, I forget that, yeah, maybe something I have to offer is going to be different because it's also music bringing to them that they may not get in their day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's helpful to remember how music has affected us when we're seeing someone, and sometimes it could be someone who's at a very similar level. And if you just think back far enough, you probably will find some times in our lives, we'll find those times in our lives where it had a profound effect, and we have to, as you said, remember that happens to people when they see it.
Right.
Tara, thank you very much for spending time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me on here. It's just been a blessing to me as well.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
You know who's been around for over 20 years now? Bandzoogle. If you don't yet have a website for your music, you should check it out. It was created to help musicians and bands build their websites and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. They have amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell merch, music, tickets, and more, plus tools that can capture detailed fan data for you. Try it out for free at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, that's ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. If you love this podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the many, many ways of showing your love and support. One of which is through our tip jar. So you can just, click tip and be done. Your support equals love. The series music you heard and are hearing is the instrumental version of my song New Gods Part True. You can find links for all the places to hear the full version with vocals by yours truly at robonzo.com. Thank you for listening to The Unstarving Musician. Be sure and tell your friends, leave us a review. Until next time, keep making, keep learning, and keep earning from your music. Peace, love, and a whole lot of gratitude.